This is The Resilient Life, where we believe that every human will struggle in this life. Our challenge is to struggle well. I'm Ryan Manion. I lost my brother to war, my mom to cancer, and I'm the daughter of a retired Marine. I'm also a wife, mom, author, and president of one of the nation's leading veteran service organizations. Join me and some incredible guests as we explore the value of struggling well through life's inevitable challenges. Welcome to another episode of the Resilient Life podcast. I'm really excited for today's guest, a friend to not just myself, but the Travis Manion Foundation does so much to help and work with the veterans in our community. Can't thank him enough for the time he gives with his incredibly busy schedule. Jocko, welcome to the Resilient Life.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. So getting started, I want to talk to you a little bit about I think the way that people recognize you. And if you follow Jocko on social media platforms, you know, kind of the most recognizable thing about you is you wake up at 4:30 in the morning. And that's your thing. You wake up, you work out, you get your day started. I had someone on here, a guest on the podcast very early on, the CEO of Casper, which is a mattress company. And they consider themselves not a mattress company, but a sleep company. And they're all about how there isn't enough importance on sleep to your health. And I was thinking about you when I was interviewing him. I'm like, you know, if I ever am able to have Jocko on the podcast, I want to talk to him about this idea that, you know, and I get conceptually, you know, you're getting up at 4:30, you're up before everyone else, you're getting done what you have to get done. But what factor does that play when they're saying, listen, in order to have optimal health, you need 8 hours of sleep a night. You need to make sure that you are getting sleep, because that's as important as your physical health. That's important as what you put in your body. And so for me, that kind of goes against this idea of waking up at 4:30. And, you know, backtracking, I think I've seen, like, you don't go to bed that early. You're not going to bed early enough that you're putting in the prescribed amount of sleep time. So I want to dive into that a little and see, you know, your thoughts on that and the concept of sleep as an important health factor.
Yeah, well, I agree. I believe that sleep is a very important health factor, and I think that people should sleep as much as they need. And I think there's also a genetic component to it that some people don't need as much sleep as other people. I can't sleep 8 hours, even if I wanted to. So to me, it's just, you know, I just get up early, try and get stuff done. But I wrote a book called Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. And when people get kind of hypersensitive about sleep, I just tell them to go read what I wrote in the book, which is like, hey, everyone needs sleep. Sleep is good for you. Sleep as much as you can. I will say, try and get up at a consistent time every day. I think that's very helpful if you try and get up at a consistent time every day. But I don't encourage people to not sleep. That doesn't seem like a good move. I don't think it's very healthy. I also don't encourage people to sleep in, because if you spend a bunch of your time sleeping, people are like, oh, you'll live longer. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be alive longer, but I slept the whole time. So no, get sleep. I have nothing against sleep. Get all the sleep you can. The reason I know I know there's a genetic component to it. My oldest daughter also doesn't sleep very much. When she was in high school, I would go to bed at like 11 o'clock at night, and she would be up studying. And then I wake up at 4:30 and she'd be up studying. So she doesn't need very much sleep. My next daughter, she doesn't get out of bed until there's some kind of an emergency happening. So, you know, it's just different people have a little different needs, but yeah, it seems to be healthy to sleep. So if you need sleep, get it.
I like that too. I think, you know, getting up at a consistent time, whether it's 4:30 or 7:30 or 9 o'clock, just making sure that you're getting up and starting your day. So that makes sense. You talk a lot about, well, you wrote a book, Discipline Equals Freedom, your field manual, extreme ownership, with our friend Leif Babin. And, you know, you were actually talking to some of our veterans last year going through our Spartan Leadership Program. And you were talking about, someone asked about motivation, and I'm sure you've said this about 1,000 times before, but when you were talking about it, it was the first time I heard it. It was the first time I heard you say it. And you said motivation is a fleeting emotion. It comes and goes. And I was the person that was like, God, I just can't get myself motivated today. And I would ebb and flow with everything, right? Like personally, professionally, um, working out, not working out. And I would just be like, God, I wish there was a way that I could stay consistently motivated. And it was like a light switch for me when you said, like, it's not, you just have to be disciplined because you're never going to be motivated all the time. And it was a huge wake up call for me. I wrote it down. I wrote it down on a piece of scrap paper. I posted it the next day on social media. I was like, maybe you've heard this before. I never have. And it opened my eyes so much to this idea of discipline and what that means. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about the idea of discipline because it's very different than motivation. And discipline comes when, I'm saying, oh, I'm just not motivated to get out of bed today. And I just don't have it in me. Like, how do you take that idea of discipline? And, you know, you and I are different. You're a retired lieutenant commander in the Navy. You have done very physical things over the course of your life. You were taught discipline, right? So I look at myself and I wonder, how do I take that component, that idea of discipline? And I can sit here with you today and say, I understand it 100%. I get it. But how do I apply that when I'm feeling like shit, when I've been up late because of work, when my kids are driving me crazy? Like, how do I tap into that inner discipline and say, no matter what? It's easier said than done. I mean, and I think probably even for you, right? But like, how do you get to that place that you just don't come out of it?
Yeah, there's a bunch of little things that I think about when you ask a question like that. And one of them is like, don't negotiate with weakness because you'll lose. You can rationalize anything in your head to give yourself an excuse on, well, I was up kind of late last night and I'm not feeling great. And the kids, I should pay attention to the kids. And I also need to do this other paperwork. And I've also got this other thing going on. So if I skip this workout, my body needs rest. By the way, sleep is important. I should probably sleep into it. You can rationalize anything with yourself in your own head. So if you start to negotiate what you're going to do, you'll lose that negotiation every single time and the weakness will win. And so you just, the other thing I'll say is like, don't think about it. People are like, oh, what do you think about when you wake up in the morning? Nothing. I don't think about anything. The alarm clock goes off, I get up and I go. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. I don't have any thought process because if I did start thinking about it, I'd start rationalizing and thinking about a bunch of reasons why maybe today's the day that I need off. In fact, I have a rule. I don't take today off. If I really feel tired, I'll say, okay, if I still feel tired tomorrow, I'll take the day off, but still got to go get it today. And normally the next day you don't need another day off. So yeah, motivation's just an emotion. And it's just like being happy or sad. It comes and goes. And if you count on that, you're going to fail. So don't count on emotion. Don't count on motivation. Just count on discipline. Go do what you're supposed to do.
I guess I counted on motivation for too long. And it's gotten the best of me because I think like everyone, there's times and we're, heading into the new year. You've got this, you look at people like right now, everybody's saying, how is this year going to be different? Right? Like, what am I going to do? And I think a lot of motivation comes at the end or the beginning of a year, right? It's like, all right, I'm going to turn over a new leaf. I'm going to do this. And, you know, you talk about extreme ownership, the concept of ownership. You wrote a whole book on it. The book is fantastic. And as we move into the new year, people are setting New Year's resolutions, which I never set a New Year's resolution. It's not something that I found many years ago that setting a New Year's resolution for me was like it. It didn't work. It was just what am I going to say I'm going to do that I'm going to fail at in 2 months? I'm that classic person that just sets that resolution and then doesn't stick to it. So I don't set resolutions anymore. But why do you think owning who you are, the changes, improvements you want to see, even in your defeats, is important?
Well, if you don't take ownership of things that have gone wrong, then there's nothing you can do to fix them. So if you say, well, I didn't get that job because the person that interviewed me didn't like me. Okay, well, then what are you going to change for your next interview? Nothing, because it's not your fault. So why would I change anything? I'm just going to go do what I did. And the next person hopefully will like me, and then I'll get hired. So you don't change anything. If your health isn't a good position and you say, well, it's because my job, I was working so much and therefore I got out of shape. Okay, well, what are you going to change? That's not under your control. That's because your job is so horrible. If you're having trouble with, one of your employees and you're like, oh, well, that's because my employee is dumb and is not in the game. Okay, well, what are you going to change then? Nothing. So why are they going to change? So when you have something that's wrong, some issue, and you just point the finger at somebody else, or you blame someone else, or you blame something else, you don't change anything. You don't make any adjustments. So therefore, nothing is going to change in your life. Whereas if you take ownership of everything, and now you say, oh, I didn't get the job. Well, what did I do? What can I do better? How can I square away my resume? How can I prepare for those questions better? What answers did I give that weren't solid? Cool. Then you get one of your friends to role play with you, and you start going through all the tough questions that you could get. You clean up your resume, you take another class and whatever subject is going to help you get that next job, and you make changes and you get hired. Or if you say, oh, you know what? I'm unhealthy because my job is, I have to work a lot. Okay, well, here's what I can do. I waste 2 hours a day looking at social media or watching television. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to make changes. Okay, cool. Now I start working out during that time, and now I actually get in shape. Or my employee's not in the game. Okay, what am I doing wrong? How can I get into my employee's head to get them more in the game? Oh, I got an idea. How about I give them some ownership? How about I talk to them about how they come up with the next plan for this task that we've got or this project that we've got? And then they feel like they've got some ownership. They feel like they've got some control over their own destiny, and they step up and they start to change it. So you can find solutions to these things, but you can only find solutions if you take ownership of the problem.
Do you think that ownership, this idea of ownership, when I look at it, and I will say, you waited a little bit when everything happened with Afghanistan. I was waiting for, like, what's Jocko going to say, with everything going on here. I was waiting for your thoughts on it. And you bring out your thoughts in this really cool monologue, and you're talking as if you are, the president. You're owning like what has happened. This is what I would say if I were in this situation. And I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. And I thought that in looking at it, you've never, ever, ever in the history seen someone, a elected official, come out and take the kind of ownership you took in that video. And then I started to think more about this idea of, like, I don't know if we as a society would even know how to react to a politician taking ownership for something, because they just, all they do is pass the blame and pass the buck. Like, that's what they're known for, right? And so I dealt with it actually recently. I'm a township supervisor. So our town operates with a board of 5 supervisors. One of my supervisors did something that she shouldn't have done. She did something that she knew was wrong. She called me before the meeting because there was a ton of people that were going to be showing up to the meeting to publicly call on her to resign. And she said, "Listen, I did what was right. It was around a school board meeting. She actually was able to go into our school district and put some propaganda through, like, the pony mail system. So every teacher in our school district got her, like, propaganda. And whether or not I agreed with what like, her thoughts, like, what she did was wrong. It was
Mhm.
ethically wrong. And so I said to her, you need to show up tonight and you need to take accountability for what you did. And and she said, "Well, do you have any other advice?" I'm like, "There is no other advice. Go take accountability for what you did. You know that there is a ton of people that are going to be showing up tonight." And she got up behind the dais. We're all sitting there. There's 50 people that showed up to get behind the mic and, give their thoughts on the everything she did. And she sat there and afterwards she said, well, I did what I thought needed to be done. You guys don't know the full story. And I mean, my jaw just dropped and I'm like, is she kidding me? Like, and after and it's continued. I mean, every day we're getting more things for people to calling on her to resign. My inbox is full. And I said, I talked to her afterwards. I said, I can't defend you because it's not even about what you did now. It's about your how you're acting in the aftermath of it. Like it's indefensible. I sat there on the phone and told you take accountability for your actions. And you sat there and said, you guys don't know the full story. Like it was, you don't know the full story. And it's just so indicative of our political system, our politicians. Nobody takes accountability. Nobody takes ownership. And I think that that's why there's so much distrust with our elected officials. And I looked at that and I was like, this video, while I agree with everything Jocko's saying, it's almost taboo because you would never hear something like this. And so, when you look ultimately at what's happening in the world today, when you look at our elected officials, if you could name one thing that's missing, it's ownership. It's on both sides, because there's a lot of ownership to be had. And you think of how much better things would function, but everybody's worried about that next check they're not going to get if they take ownership for something, or that next election that's 2 years around if they're running for Congress. I mean, it's just, it's frustrating. And I appreciate you kind of taking that stand, going out there and saying, this is what I would do if I were in this position.
Yeah, and I mean, clearly the feedback I got on that video was everyone said exactly what you said. Hey, it was really refreshing to see. I wish we had someone that would act like that. Wish we had any politician that would act like that. So people, it's part of it is a majority of it. What stops people from taking ownership is their own ego. And sure that, and then you play on top of that the fear of, well, this will hurt me politically. It'll hurt my image. It'll hurt my party. And so they think that, but the opposite is actually true. The opposite is true. If you have an employee that comes to you and lies, or, they failed to meet a project timeline, and you say, hey, what happened with that? And they said, well, the contractors didn't get done their part, and the supplies didn't show up on time. That's why the project didn't get done. They're just pointing the finger, and you go, okay, well, how do we fix those things? But you don't trust that person. Your trust doesn't go up with them. Your respect doesn't go up for them. But if they say, if I say, hey, Ryan, what happened with this project? Why is this project late? And you say, hey, listen, first of all, I didn't play close enough monitor to the contractors that were working, and I let them fall behind. That's my fault. Next time I'm going to track them closely to make sure they're getting their stuff done. And then also, I didn't order the supplies early enough, so we had supplies show up late. That'll never happen again. I've already ordered all the materials for the next projects we have. It won't happen again. I'm sorry. This is my fault, and I won't let it happen again. What do I think of you? I go, oh, great. Now I'm going to put you in charge of more projects because I trust you more. But to the ego hit that it causes to say, hey, I was wrong. This is my fault. No one likes to do that. And then people's misguided misconception of how you appear when you make excuses and when you cast blame. People think that no one sees it. People think that when you say, hey, it wasn't my fault, it was Ryan's fault, people think, oh, okay. In my own mind, I think, see, now everyone thinks it's Ryan. No, I'm the one that's in charge. Right. I'm the one that's in charge. It's not Ryan's fault. So yeah, it's very sad. It's kind of crazy that people don't take ownership, because it is the best way to get problem solved. It's the best way to earn back the trust of people that are disappointed in what happened, and disappointed in you as an individual. The best way to get respect back is to tell them the truth, take ownership, and get the problem solved. But people fail to see that every single day, unfortunately.
I think it's easier though in business, right? I think it's easier for you as the head of Echelon Front and the other businesses that you run to say, I'm going to take ownership for these things. I think it's harder from a political standpoint, right? I think there's a lot of different factors that play into it. If you're an elected official and saying, I've got to take ownership. Like I look at somebody like I look at all the array and string of politicians, and somebody who I have massive respect for and actually is they continually pair the two of you together for a great running team is Tulsi Gabbard.
Mm.
Now, Tulsi takes accountability. She takes ownership. I've seen her do it. And it's made her wildly popular to level-headed Americans that just want good people running their country. But for her, politically trying to run for president, it was like, "Pff, you're out of here, like that quickly, right? And so you look at it from that standpoint, and you're like, can anybody that is literally just a good person who wants to lead, that knows how to lead, penetrate this system and actually get through for, our country to actually have real leadership?
Are you asking me that question right now?
I'm asking you that question.
It's going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Because the thing that would be challenging is you would have to play the game to some level to
Right.
get in that situation where you could actually get elected. So Tulsi didn't play the game. And that's part of why, we love her. That's part of why I love her. I think she's great because she didn't play the game. She didn't like Hillary Clinton, and she went against Hillary Clinton. She didn't play the game. Everyone else was like, oh, yep, it's going to be Clinton. Cool. We're all on board with Hillary Clinton. And Tulsi went against her and supported Bernie Sanders. And they hated, she went against the pack, and they held that against her to this day. And so, what could she have played the game better? Now, maybe her principles won't allow her to do that, which we all respect. But can we get to a point where the political machine can be penetrated by someone that's not going to play the game? I don't know. Right now, no, that's proven. Tulsi is proof that it doesn't work, because Tulsi's as good of a candidate as you could ever want. She's a veteran. She's totally squared away. She has experience in government. Like, she's a great candidate. She's an very articulate, very level-headed. And so if she can't do it, well, then how is, who is going to be able to do it? I can't think of someone that would be able to do it easier than her. And, so we'll see. Now, who did kind of do it is Donald Trump. Donald Trump was an outsider, and the establishment hated him. But, I would say he had a big name, he had money, and he was able to bring supporters. And, some people pointed that out to me. I was saying that no one has ever been hated by the establishment more than Tulsi. And then someone pointed out to me, yeah, actually Donald Trump was hated by the establishment more than Tulsi, or at least as much as Tulsi. So they're both outsiders. Neither one of them played the game. Donald Trump was able to pull it off. I think it might be easier to pull off for a conservative person than for a liberal person, because I think it seems like the Democratic Party is more authoritarian in how they operate. So,
you got to have a lot of money, though, right? You need a lot of money. So, you hear, I mean, I was listening to your podcast with Rogan the other day, and he's like, oh, when are you running? When are you going to run? And you laugh it off. And I've heard it brought up before, and you kind of laugh it off. But I mean, do you ever think about that? Do you ever think about stepping into the arena?
I really hope I never have to do anything like that. It's the same answer I give every time. I really do not want to do that. I don't like politics, everything that we're talking about. I don't like playing the game, and I know I'd have to play the game in order to make progress. And it's just not something that I don't think I have the stomach for it.
Yeah.
And I'm just not, I just don't like that kind of stuff. If things, when, I always say if things got really bad and, when everything has been happening for the last couple of years, people are like, is it bad enough yet? Come on, Jocko, is it bad enough yet? And, we still have a relatively stable economy. We have, infrastructure in place. We have electricity. I'm talking really bad.
Okay.
Then I might have to do something. But I really do hope I never have to do anything like that. I don't want to do it. It's not my scene. I don't like it. I don't like politicians. I don't like political stuff. So hopefully I don't have to.
Crap. I hope you don't run, because if you say it has to be really bad and this isn't really bad, I don't want to know what really bad is. So I hope you never get to that place where you say, okay, now it's time.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think about with you, and I've had the honor and privilege of coming on your podcast. You had my dad on your podcast first when my dad came out with his book, and and I've gotten to know you through our mutual friends, Leif and Jenna, and I feel like I know who Jocko is, um, deeper than just a social media follower or podcast follower, right? But I, for some people, you're a little too much. And I heard you talking on Rogan's podcast, and you were saying after you did his first podcast, he told you don't look at the comments. So what did you do? You grabbed a cup of coffee, sat down with your daughter, and went through the comments, because you were like, now I got to know what the comments say, right? And you were like, I'm unaffected by it. Of course, my daughter was totally affected by it, and I totally get that concept, because when I've talked about doing different things, my daughter will be like, no, I don't want anybody. Yeah, no, I don't want anybody to say anything bad about you. Don't do that. Da, 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 So, the love for a parent, but you're like, listen, I don't care what people say. And that struck me, because I'll tell you, I do care what people say. Like, I'm a person that, like, for every, and it's something I've struggled with. For every 50 people that may write something positive about something I post, if one person puts something, it makes me rethink everything. I'm like, well, wait a minute. And it's actually my COO at the Travis Manion Foundation said to me, Ryan, you are never, and I do it even with staff surveys. We survey our staff every year, and we'll have like 95% approval rating for, like, that people love the job at TMF. They love what they're doing. And then there'll be like 1%. So basically, like, one person is dissatisfied with TMF, and we'll say, like, dissatisfied with TMF and its leadership. And I'm like, it makes me rethink everything I'm doing. And he's like, what are you doing? Like, how are you letting this affect you? You're not looking at the 95%. And I'm like, for me, I'm like, I want everybody to be happy. I want everybody to feel the way I feel about the work that we do. I want everybody to understand when I'm putting something out that it's meant, in a good way. And it was interesting for me for you to say, like, listen, I don't really care what people say. Like, and I wondered, are you really that, is there anything that does affect you, that when people say something, or is it a certain level of a person? Like, if you hear somebody where you're like, I kind of respect that person, and crap, they just said something that not good about me. Like,
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, Joe Rogan was specifically talking about YouTube comments.
right.
And so, people are gonna say crazy things about you on YouTube. People are gonna say crazy things about you on social media. You can jump in and look at who's saying something about you and see what type of person they are. For the most part, so if someone is just talking smack, just to get a rise out of me, or whatever, that truly does not affect me. Like, I literally don't care, and I laugh at them. And even my daughter, like, she was like, oh my God, but she wasn't freaking out or anything.
Right.
So that stuff. Now, if I were to see a bunch of people that were writing like, hey, Jocko, your viewpoint on that is messed up, and I might think, okay, well, what is my viewpoint? Just like being a leader, when I'm a leadership position, and I have a vision about something and someone on my team says, hey, I'm not sure we should do it that way, I say, well, what do you think? And I listen to them. So there's a huge difference between bot posts on
Right.
YouTube and opening your ears to listen to areas that you might not have a good perspective on. And so I think it's really important to actually listen to other people. And if people make an articulate statement to me about some viewpoint that I have that might be wrong. And by the way, I think I'm wrong about all kinds of stuff. I know I can't see things. I know I don't see things the way other people see them. I know I have, blind spots and gaps in my vision about certain subjects. So I have no problem with admitting that I'm wrong. And it's also something that I very rarely will say that I'm right 100% on this particular subject. There's almost no subject that I'll say that about. There's almost no subject that I'll tell you, hey, I am 100% right about this, and there's no gray area. There's almost no subjects that I would bring up or that anyone could ask me about that I would give an answer like that. And that probably is why I don't get a bunch of people, trying to come at me, because I'm talking. I don't come out and make claims that are black and white.
Yeah.
I talk about, my perspective and always leave things open for other people's perspectives. From my perspective, it looks like this. And I usually talk about the other perspective that I'm concerned that I don't see. I normally will admit that I don't see a certain other perspective. So I think I mean, again, there's a huge difference between social media. And I guess basically I probably have a decent mental filter at this point of who's making a legitimate, concerned
Well,
comment.
I'll bring up an example, and it was something, and I'm not talking about, the bots, or Joe
Mhm.
Rogan thinks everything's a Russian troll that's, posting negative, but like, so there is a Instagram page called Killzone. I don't know if you're familiar with Killzone, and run by a Marine. I actually had him on my podcast. And he wrote the foreword for War is a Racket. And you did a breakdown, I guess, of War is a Racket on one of your podcasts. And he vehemently disagreed with your assessment of War is a Racket. And he went on, and I'll send it to you. And he went on, and I really respect this guy. He was an instructor at the Naval Academy. He's a major in the Marine Corps, up at the Naval War College now. And he did, 40 minutes going through your podcast and disputing every kind of assessment you made on War is a Racket. And, and he tagged you in it. So I feel okay saying it. I went back to make sure, like, he publicly tagged you. So I was like, okay, he's okay. He was looking for Jocko to kind of, and it wasn't done in a bad way, but it was interesting for me to see, his assessment of something. And I wondered, I'm like, has Jocko seen this, right? Has Jocko seen this breakdown from someone that I know that you would have tremendous respect for, that you would love to hear his thoughts and opinions on something? And so something like that. But he had somebody with him where he was kind of going back and forth, and kind of breaking everything down. And, it was something like that where when I'm talking about social media, I'm not talking about the, like, and I was going on and, just to mess with you. And I'm like, hold on, I pulled up. So he did this really great assessment of his thoughts on War as a Racket, what you said, what he said. And, but then I go to read the comments, and I'm like, okay, let me, and people are like, oh, what episode did Jocko cover War as a Racket? I haven't listened to that yet. I respect you both. I love to hear both sides of the opinion. And then it went to, Jocko, like many SEALs, is this a dude selling bullshit? And so, and it goes down to this wildfire. And I'm like, God, I would love for these two to connect, because, and I love that you said, like, listen, I like to hear other people's opinions. So I think you probably appreciate listening to his assessment of it. But
Yeah.
something like that, like, I always think about, like, where you get to that point where it doesn't matter what people are saying, and you have to kind of be steadfast. And it's one thing to say, like you say, I'm always going to be open. I'm never going to say I'm absolutely right. But sometimes, in business, I know at the Travis Manning Foundation, sometimes I have to make decisions and people may not be on board with it. But I have to be confident enough to say this is how we're moving forward, and I'll listen to everybody. I will take opinions, I will take assessments, but ultimately I have to make the decision, right? Ultimately, you have to make the decision. And I wonder, where's the line there? Where's the line there that you have to say, like, listen, this is how it's going to be. This is how we move forward.
Mm.
And and even with Tom, so with Killzone, Tom Schumann, listening to him, like, how do you come to a place? And again, I'm catching you in a place where you haven't even heard what he had to say, but I would love for you to listen to his take on things. And then, we can't do it now because you're not going to, but I'd love to know kind of how you take that and how you digest that as an individual.
Yeah, so I'm curious to listen to his viewpoint, and I'm sure there's a bunch of things that I'm wrong on, or that he has better research of or understands more than me, and I'm sure I could learn a lot. Anybody that has dove into that book to that level, there's definitely some things that I got wrong. So I think that's one of the key points is, especially from a leadership perspective, having an open mind as opposed to an authoritarian mind is very important. In fact, that's one of the most important characteristics, and it's tied right up there with humility, which I talk about a lot. Well, if you think about an authoritarian mindset, that's the opposite of someone that's humble. That's someone that doesn't listen. So, for me, the opposite of humility, sure, it's arrogance, but it also rolls very quickly into an authoritarian mindset, which I don't really have. So yeah, I mean, I would always be open to hearing other people's interpretations. And like I said, I can absolutely be wrong. I'm no authority on General Butler, Smedley, but I'm no authority on him. I probably researched that book for a few hours before going and doing a podcast on it. If you've got someone that, is in the Marine Corps, taught at the Naval Academy, there's no doubt he should be much more well-versed than I am. So, that's all good with me. As far as decision-making in any company, whether it's, Echelon Front or Origin or Jocko Fuel or any of the companies that I have, most of the time I don't have to make any decisions because my team is executing on the vision more than on, day-to-day instructions or decisions. Do I occasionally have to make a decision? Occasionally, but it's very rare. And when it is, it's usually by the time I'm making the decision, everyone is already on board and we're going in that direction anyways. So if I'm making a decision that I'm getting a bunch of resistance from my team, there's something either wrong with my decision or there's something wrong with the way I'm communicating with my team where they can actually understand what's happening and why I'm making this decision. So I'm probably going to spend some more time educating myself about what they know and educating them about what I know so that we can get aligned. Because, in my companies, right, what are we trying to do? We're trying to, well, at Echelon Front, we're trying to teach the lessons that we learned to as many people as we can. We're trying to take care of the people that are on our team, and we're trying to make money. And it's actually every single person on the team is aligned with those goals. So if I'm talking to Leif and I'm saying, Leif, no, we need to charge this client more and do less for them. And he might say, well, hey, Jocko, they can't afford it, so they're not going to hire us. And aren't we trying to get this information out there? You know what? You're right. So we're aligned. And when you're aligned inside your organization, it's very easy to get everyone on board and all the decisions make sense. And I always found that in the military as well. I mean, in the military, we want to execute our mission. We want to take care of our guys, keep them safe. We want to get the job done. Who's going to come up with a plan that is going to get a bunch of people unnecessarily hurt and people on the team are going to be down, okay with that decision? That doesn't happen. Yeah. Right now, could it be that I tell my team, hey, this is how we're going to execute this mission, and they say, no, we shouldn't do it that way, And I say, why not? And they say, well, we've got intel that there's a bunch of bad guys over on this, adjacent village, and we're going to get into a big gunfight. Oh, okay, cool. Thank you for telling me that. Now that I know that, we can make a different decision. So as long as we're aligned, decision-making is usually pretty easy in a business environment for sure. And even in the military, I found the same thing. Again, for me, it has most to do with making sure you have an open mind about the topics that you're discussing.
Do you think that you learned most of these principles in the military?
Yes. I mean, I just by the fact that I spent my entire adult life in the military. So, and by the time I retired from the military, I'm not talking about anything different than I was talking about when I was in the SEAL teams.
Right.
So yes, I learned all this stuff inside the SEAL teams by watching by the way, I never went to any leadership course of any kind. The SEAL teams, from the way my career went, I was an enlisted guy. There was no leadership training. By the time I transitioned to an officer, there was no leadership training for the level of enlisted guy that I was. And there still wasn't until a few years ago inside the SEAL teams. Then I became an officer, no leadership training, and never had any leadership training of any kind. So all the leadership principles that I talk about, I either learned bits and pieces from various people that actually said something to me, but that was very minimal. Most of it was from watching good leaders and emulating them, and watching bad leaders and trying to not do what they were saying or what they were doing.
I have come to find that I think you can learn more about leadership from bad leaders than good ones. Um, it's been my experience over my professional career, um, because it just gives you a blueprint of what not to do. And I'm sure in the military, there are good leaders and there are bad leaders.
Yeah, I had some absolutely terrible leaders in my career, and I learned a ton from them. So I don't know if it's you learn more, but you can at least learn an equivalent amount. I think maybe you can learn you learn more about what not to do, but that's a broad spectrum. So it might seem like you're learning more, but to actually learn what to do is harder. So you might learn less, but they're more valuable lessons.
Right.
That's what I would say. I
Yeah.
learned a lot from bad leaders, but the most valuable lessons I learned, though smaller in number, they were much more valuable to me.
Yeah. There's one thing that I really I love about the way that you carry yourself and your brand, and you have a brand, and you have a great brand. And with Echelon Front, my husband came to your very first muster. Leif gave him a ticket to come to your first ever muster, and he still talks about it, and so I love what you do at Echelon Front. We actually have Jamie coming in, and she will be giving a, a presentation on ownership to the staff at Travis Manion Foundation.
Awesome.
So excited for that. But Echelon Front, Jocko Fuel, um, the way that you have branded that around first responders, and Wawa, I'm a Philly girl, so like that whole thing. Origin, you've got a great brand, but I also love how you stay very true to your background, and and who you were before Echelon Front, Origin, Jocko Fuel. And you talk about your time in the military, but one of the things that you lean on heavily is making sure that you continually honor your fallen brothers. And it's not just a Memorial Day thing for you. It's not just a passing, like, people really feel that. I feel that. I feel the sense of brotherhood, and as the sister of a fallen Marine, there's nothing that gives me more comfort than knowing that the guys that he served with, still care, are still thinking about him. And that means more than anything. And so this isn't a question, but just more of like a thank you, because you do such a tremendous job of making sure that the SEALs that you served with, that gave their lives, that their stories are learned, that their stories are told. And there's nothing more that families of the fallen want than for us to know that our loved ones' stories continue, their names are shared. And, with your platform to be able to do that for some tremendous SEALs, I thank you for that. It means a lot.
Well, it's an honor to be able to share their stories. It was an honor to know those guys, and it's an honor every time I get to share their stories. So I appreciate it, and I'm gonna do that forever. I had a guy on my podcast, Colonel Tom Fife, he was in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and he got a Purple Heart in each one of those each one of those wars. And we he was on the podcast, and we talked about World War II, we talked about Korea, we were talking about Vietnam. It's a long podcast, and this was a couple of years ago. But when we started talking about Vietnam, we started, he was a battalion commander in Vietnam. And when he was a battalion commander in Vietnam, we were talking about what types of missions they were doing, and what area of operations they were in, and what kind of tactics they were using. And then I just was asking him what kind of casualties he suffered. And here it was, probably 50 years or 55 years after he had left Vietnam, and he started getting choked up talking about the guys that he lost. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, so this is the way it's always going to be for me, and that's okay. And I've told many of my veteran friends that story, because the emotions, they will always be there, and they can come back at any time. But I think, understanding that that's part of that's part of the burden, and it's part of the gift that you get as a veteran, or as someone that's lost someone. That's part of the burden, it's part of the gift. It's heavy to carry, but it's a gift that you got the opportunity to serve with these guys and know them. So it's an honor for me to tell that story, to tell their stories as much as I can.
Well, thank you again. Thank you for that. I love when I see people learning um, their stories through you. So, continue to use your platform for that, because it's awesome. Um, I want to talk a little bit about resilience, because this podcast is called The Resilient Life. And so, I'd love to know what role resilience factors in to the kind of leader you are, both in and out of your home. Is that a word that you focus on? Is that something that plays into your identity, resilience?
It's not a word that I really focus on very much. And I'm trying to think of why, because I know it's a popular word, and I know that there's a lot of talk about resiliency, but I don't think I don't think the word resilience is in any of my books. I'll have to do a word search at some point. But I've written like a bunch of books, kids books, adult books, and I don't think I use it. Now, I'm not saying that I shouldn't have. Maybe there's a place where it fit in there. Maybe I used a different term to describe it, but it's not a word that I use a lot. I think one of the reasons that I don't use it a lot is because I've never really thought about it very much. And I think one of the reasons that I've never really thought about it very much is because I think I probably have a decent amount of natural resilience. And so therefore it's almost like something that I don't think about a lot, because it's always kind of there for me. And so I think I don't focus on it enough, and I probably should focus on it more. I also think that whenever I work with people, we all kind of get that vibe going where we're not, we're not letting things pull us down. We're not focused on what happened yesterday. And it's obviously you have to learn some of that being in the military. You lose guys get wounded, guys get killed. You can't you almost can't not be resilient. You've got to go. You got to continue on. You've got to carry on your mission. You've got to continue to do operations. So resiliency was just like part of life in the SEAL teams for sure. So I would say I probably don't focus on it enough. And it's obviously it's a great quality. Uh, as I'm sitting here thinking about it again, because I don't talk about it a lot, I think probably one of the reasons why I am, you know, decently resilient is because I am not because I'm stronger or mentally tougher, but I think it's more because I don't have a lot of ups or downs. So
Yeah.
when something goes well, I don't highly celebrate it. When something goes poorly, I don't focus on it. And part of this comes from something I do talk about a lot in my books, which is the ability to be able to detach, to take a step back, to detach from your emotions a little bit, to detach from the chaos and the mayhem, take a step back, look around, do a good assessment of what's actually happening, and carry on. So that's what I think. I probably, again, being in the military and even as a kid, I remember I learned at a certain point that getting overly angry, getting overly happy, getting overly sad, none of those things were going to be beneficial. And listen, just to be clear, I'm not talking about totally detaching from your emotions. I'm not talking about turning it into a robot. I'm not talking about burying your emotions either. I'm not talking about detaching and saying, oh, well, we're just going to carry on with the mission. No, believe me, I've cried more than anybody. Well, I can't say that. I've cried many, many, many hours and hours and hours and hours and days. And so I'm not saying don't, just don't to bury your emotions, but to detach from your emotions, to take a step back and say, okay, this is what happened. This is what I'm dealing with. This is how I need to move forward. I think that's a healthy thing. I think that's those things that I just talked about, probably the fact that I don't get super excited. I was hunting this year and I shot a bull elk, I killed 2 bull elk. And, the first one I shot, the guide was telling the story to my friend later on. And he says, yeah, Jocko got the shot. It was awesome. I looked over at Jocko and I said, heck yeah, that was awesome. And Jocko looked at me and said, cool. And then the other one's actually on video. You could see my friend that I was with was totally pumped, and he's a great guy. And he was totally stoked. And he looks at me and I was like, I had a smile on my face, but even the goods aren't that, I try and keep my emotions, or I don't even try and keep them that way. My emotions through time, I've recognized that hyper emotions in either direction are probably not that good. And I think that is good. And I think detaching is good somewhat. And I think that probably has helped me to be a fairly resilient person.
Why do you think that? I mean, for me, I want to feel that I mean, I guess it's just the way I want things to run through, my body, but like I want to feel that high of being, happy. I get this idea of detachment, and you say, like, when you're talking about it, you're like, detach, you just keep going. Well, when I ask people about being resilient, what does it mean to be resilient? The first answer you get is like, just put one foot in front of the other. So it's the same concept. You're maybe just saying it a little bit differently, but why not experience the joy in a bigger way? Like, what is that taking away from you, or what is that doing to help you to not feel that high and to be like, hell yeah, I just killed that bull elk, like why not feel that way? Why don't you want to feel that?
It's not even that I don't want to. I think I know that it's better to be a little bit more, moderated, a little bit more modulated, and not get overexcited, especially because, all glory is fleeting. All glory is fleeting. You do something great today. And, I was actually my first deployment to Iraq. My platoon did a series of operations in a very short period of time. It was like, I think we did 4 operations in like a 24-hour period. And at that time, this was early in the war. It was like 2003. No one had much combat experience. Missions were everyone was still like super excited about missions. And my commanding officer had just showed up in country, and he was a great guy. I was friends with him. And so we conducted these operations. We caught these bad guys. It was like we caught like a bad guy, then we went and got his friend, then we got his friend, and we just kind of caught a bunch of bad guys, whatever. And my boss came down and he was super excited, and he like shook my hand and said, "Hey, that was like just outstanding work for you to be able to turn and burn on so many targets, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "Hey, sir, give me 24 hours. I'm sure we'll screw it up."
Yeah.
And so I guess it's kind of like you were saying earlier, when you read something negative, you're like, "Oh, what can I fix?" Well, when something positive happens, I think, "Hey, okay, cool. But, let's be careful about getting overconfident or cocky about what's going good." I think I'm probably a little bit hyper cautious about being excited about when things go good, because I know how quickly the tide can turn, and you can have things going great 1 minute, and then a minute later, things can be going in a completely opposite direction. So again, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know very much about resiliency. I could be wrong about this. What you're saying makes me feel bad, because you're like, "Hey, shouldn't you be happy and excited and stuff?" And I'm sitting there thinking, well, that does sound good, but it's just, I don't have it in me
That's
too.
who
Like
you
it's
are.
not,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not like I'm suppressing it.
Right.
Like,
Okay.
when my daughter made it to states in wrestling, even then I'm trying to think of like when I was super happy. I was happy, but even then I was like, I was happy, but I wasn't like getting crazy or anything like that. I don't know. I guess it's probably good to, in my opinion, I think that if you have really high highs, you're probably going to have low lows. That's my opinion. And people that I've known in my life that have really high highs often have really low lows. So all I can tell you is what my perspective is. I don't have really high highs, and I don't have really low lows.
Yeah.
So I think that is why I don't think about resiliency a lot, because I don't need a lot of it, because my lows aren't that bad. If something really bad happens to me, I look around and I go, "Okay, well, this is how we're going to fix it. This is how we're going to solve the problem."
Fair enough.
You just threw a big butt at me as I was talking. Go
No,
ahead.
well, and then you said right after, because you were just like, "I don't have high highs and I don't have low lows," and I'm like, okay, well, like when I didn't look at this word resiliency, frankly, I wouldn't have been able to give you any example of how I was resilient as a person until after my brother was killed in Iraq. So that was my lowest of low, right? And then it kind of went. So I understand that life is ebbs and flows, right? It's hills and valleys. And so it's kind of accepting that. So, but I'm okay with, I want to give myself that feeling of the highs, even if it's going to make me feel more with the lows, and that's just who I am, right? And so, but I appreciate what you're saying. I don't think I could operate in that world, but I appreciate it.
Well, I think what a really nice lesson here for everybody is what you and I are saying. And there's a really important similarity between what you and I are both saying. And that is there's lows and there's highs. And I think that's where people get stuck sometimes, is they get something bad happens and they lose sight of the fact that it's secular and things are going to go back up again. Now, I've talked about depression with people, and I don't think I don't have depression. I don't feel that way. I feel like fine. But when I've known people that are depressed, the way I describe it is like their head is in a storm cloud, and that storm cloud, everywhere they look, there's darkness. And what they don't see is, like us from the outside, we can see that there's light all around them. They just can't see it yet. And so I think it's what you and I are both saying right now. And I don't think either one of us is necessarily wrong. I think the important lesson is that if you're in a low spot in life, if you've been knocked down, hang on, because you will come back up again. And look, it can get dark and it can get bad. And it may seem like it's just never going to end, but it is going to end.
Yeah.
Life is secular, and you'll get out of that darkness and you'll come into a better place. And I think that's regardless of how high your highs are and how low your lows are as a personality or a temperament. I think both ways are fine as long as you remember that things are going to be okay.
Yeah, I talk about that a little bit in my book about this idea of failure. And, if you come to recognize that failures, which every single one of us will fail, if you recognize that after failures and after failure can come success, failure doesn't seem as bad, right? It doesn't seem as crushing. It doesn't seem as defeating. And, you talk about it like you don't get that job. That's, you failed at that. Well, if you turn your mindset to say, okay, what am I going to do to get the next job, right? Like, and you look forward as opposed to sitting in that. And that for me is resilience, right? It's saying like, I'm not going to allow this moment right here to define me in a place where I'm not going to hit that next hill, where I'm not going to go up in a trajectory. And so, I am not an expert in resilience from a scholarly perspective. I talk about resilience and just what it means to me. Resilience means like getting your ass up and keep going, no matter how bad it is, no matter how crappy or shitty you are in your life at that certain moment, and I am somebody that's dealt with anxiety. I don't think I've dealt with depression, but I've dealt with massive anxiety, like crippling anxiety, where I couldn't leave my house after my mom died, after my brother was killed. I was like, that's it. It's me and my dad. My nuclear family has been cut in half. Like you don't move forward from here, right? And I let my head get into that place where I couldn't get in my car at some points and drive more than 10 miles down the road, or I would start to like have the worst panic attacks ever. And people will talk to me about, I stopped flying. I stopped getting on flights. If you would ask me to come on your podcast, I would have been like, sorry, I can't do it, and I would have made up some excuse. There was no way I was getting on a flight to San Diego. And that was probably about a year. And people are like, well, what happened? What was the change that happened? What, was it a combination of this medication and this sort of therapy? For me, it was me telling myself, you're not going to allow yourself to live like that. And it was this idea of like, and I guess, again, I didn't recognize it at the time, but me being disciplined enough to say, I don't care if I know I'm willingly going to give myself a panic attack when I jump in this car. Or they're like, how did you get over your fear of flying? I'm like, I flew more. Like I literally flew more. I was like, okay, I'm going to go fly. And I know I'm going to have anxiety on this flight, but I have to do it. And it just got better and better and better. And so like, how do you overcome stuff? You just keep going. You just keep doing it. And so that for me is like what resiliency is about. It's probably not the academic descriptor of resilience, but that's for me, like that's what living a resilient life is all about. And so, I think again, you probably live a resilient life, and by just like, yeah, well, that's what I do. Like I don't let my highs get too high, don't get my lows get too low, and you just keep going. But I think it's important for people to know that like that is no matter what, that's the differentiator, one foot in front of the other, no matter where you are on that bell curve of being in that dark place or being in that really high place.
Yep.
Yeah. So last question for you. The question I end all of our episodes with, and just in 30 seconds or couple sentences, what does it mean? What can these viewers do to say, I'm going to live a resilient life? What does living a resilient life? I know we just talked about it for 15 minutes, but like real succinctly, what is living a resilient life?
Yeah, I think um, when people ask me this question, like they kind of want me to wrap things up or say concisely like what my beliefs are in life, and it applies to everything. And it's like it's pretty easy for me to answer because the books that I've written are just lay this stuff out, right? So you want to be resilient, take ownership of what's going on, extreme ownership of what's going on in your life. The next book I wrote was called Discipline Equals Freedom. So be disciplined. Don't count on them. Don't count on motivation. Be disciplined in what you do. I wrote a book called The Dichotomy of Leadership with Leif, and that book is about being balanced, and you have to be balanced. You know, when I talk about no super highs and no super lows, for me, that's part of being balanced. So those three things, you know, be balanced in your life, have discipline, take ownership of what's going on. And I believe you will be a very resilient person, and you'll be able to keep going on no matter what.
Love it. Jocko, thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving us your time today. And again, appreciate all you do for the Travis Manion Foundation community. I know I've told you that many times, but it means a lot. We've got a community of over 150,000 Spartans across the country, and veterans want to hear from you. They want to hear your perspective, not just veterans. I mean, well, I'm sitting here looking at Sean, and every time you say something, he's going, yeah, yeah. And
Thanks, Sean.
he's a huge fan. He's a huge fan. So, but people want to hear from you because you give it straight, and you bring a perspective that is just like cut and dry. Like, here it is, and I think that's important.
Well, I really appreciate what you all are doing. And I just specifically, I really appreciate what you all are doing to try and help younger kids. I know I did like a video for you guys, but I know I'm not the only one. And I'm sure there's ones that were a lot better than mine, but the videos that you all do to show to kids that are in school and teach them about service, about sacrifice, about, honor, courage, commitment. It's just awesome that people are trying to have an influence over kids, because that's, you can have such an impact on their lives, on everything that they do. So I appreciate that you're trying to get to the source. I've written a bunch of kids books, and the feedback I get from kids is just awesome, but it's just such a positive thing that you all are doing. I know you do a bunch of other stuff too. So thank you for continuing to share Travis's story, and thank you for everything you're doing for the veteran community and for the country at large.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll tell you, Jocko, that video is the video. It is the video that for our Character Does Matter program. So we have thousands of veterans that are trained to go out and deliver character education, and they show that video. And
Awesome.
and I was laughing too, because when you were talking about, your time in Iraq and how you caught a bunch of guys and you're like, we'll fail tomorrow. You have a line in there, and it always, I look around at the teachers when you say it, and everybody kind of chuckles, but you say, leadership is about this. And then you go, when I was in Iraq, we went and we got the bad guys. And then after we got the bad guys, we went and we killed their friends. And, this will be in a room of like sixth graders. And I'm always kind of like biting my lip, like, but I look around and I'm like, people get it. It's like, yeah, that's what you do. You go do your job, and I think for us at the Travis Manion Foundation, there's no greater mission than for us to make sure that we are playing a part in building the next generation of leaders. And there's no greater population to do that than our men and women who have worn our nation's uniform. So thank you for lending your time and talent to a video that has been shown to over 500,000 kids across the country. We appreciate it, and we appreciate
Awesome.
you. Jocko, thanks for joining us. And thank you for joining us for another episode of the Resilient Life podcast. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends.